Good morning and welcome to our extended disc webinar. Today's topic is going to be the $24 million question. GDPR is almost here. Are your assessment tools GDPR compliant? Geez, I hope I get through today's webinar saying that without getting it wrong. But my name is Christina and I am a senior trainer here at Extended Disc. And with me, my guest is Markku Kauppanen, president of Extended Disc. Welcome.
Hi, Christina. It's called GDPR, but I can use that.
I guess I have to. As usual, we will be recording this, and because it is packed, we won't have time to answer questions live on air, but feel free to put them in the questions section, and we'll follow up after the webinar. So I don't know about you guys out there, but I have been flooded with email updates on different companies' privacy policies. So today, I'm going to be learning right along with you all why this webinar topic is so time relevant and exactly, Markku, what is the GDPR?
Well, this is going to be a very different type of webinar that we usually do. Usually we talk about different kind of assessment tools and how to use the information we provide with different type of development applications. But today we're not talking about GDPR. Like you said, like I'll check my email this morning and I think I had 6 emails about updated privacy policies. And I think our friends in European Union, they know why we are getting those kind of emails. I think here in North America, we might be more focusing on maybe it's about the Facebook stuff that happened with the elections, that maybe people are updating the privacy policies for that reason, which is partially true. But really what's driving is the GDPR regulation that's going to go effect this Friday. So it's a very timely topic. It's not the most exciting topic, honestly, but it's critical that people understand the importance of this, because if you are not GDPR compliant, even if you are outside of European Union, you could get in some serious trouble.
So, as Markku said, it's being implemented now, but it's published almost 2 years ago. So tell us, what even does GDPR stand for?
Well, what the GDPR stands for is it's a General Data Protection Regulation. And Christina, you're 100% correct. This was actually published originally over 2 years ago, back in April 2016. And as a company that our roots are in Europe, so we've been very familiar with this topic for a long time. And we've been discussing this internally and preparing for this for the last 2 years. But ultimately, what the GDPR is, it's really a massive regulation. I'm proud to say I've read it. It's 175 pages long.
Holy cow.
But it includes 99 separate articles, and each of those articles have multiple requirements. But ultimately, what it comes down to is that within European Union has taken a stance that individuals, European citizens, must really have a right to have access to their own personal data. They actually have a right to control their personal data, even when it's collected by other organizations, including their employers. And ultimately, what it tells us that European Union citizens, we have to protect their data, whether they are employees, suppliers, or customers. So it's really a massive regulation that has significant impact that go beyond European Union borders because it protects European Union citizens.
So, Markku, how does this impact for those listening to us today? How does it impact their companies if they are based in the U.S. and not necessarily in the EU?
Well, I've done a lot of research on this topic the last couple of years, and the impression I have, and I don't know if this is accurate, but my impression is that here in North America, we feel a little bit insulated from this, that it doesn't really apply to us because we are not in the European Union. However, it impacts organizations worldwide if an organization has any kind of dealings within the European Union. Now, if you're an organization like we are here in Houston, Texas, if you're running a retail shop in Houston, you have few employees and all of your customers walk in, no, European Union will not reach out to you and talk about your data protection. However, if an organization that does business with European Union organizations, you have any kind of presence in the European Union, you may have a sister company there, a branch office, then GDPR is something that you really need to know about it, because it applies, and it applies for the reason that it covers European citizens. So let's say you are a consultant, you do a training session you may have an attendee that happens to be EU citizen. Theoretically, at least, GDPR applies. You're a multinational organization, you have any kind of presence in European Union, and GDPR will apply. So it has far-reaching impact. And I think what's happening here in North America, I'm talking about United States and Canada in particular, obviously, is that we really kind of being caught with our pants down with this regulation because we think it's European Union regulation, not North American regulation.
Yeah, and I saw in the title, you said the $24 million question. So I'm assuming that's some type of fine. So what would happen if my company is not ready?
Well, this is why people are really worried. It's not, trying to understand the regulation. What they really focus on, what happens if I don't comply with the regulation. And the fine for non-compliance is 20 million euro. As of today's exchange rate, that's about $24 million. So that certainly gets people's attention. And they are really serious about this, and they've really been letting us know that, hey, we published this 2 years ago. You have had 2 years to prepare, and you know exactly when this goes into effect. And that's why you are seeing those emails today, because people are crunching and making sure that they get everything in before the deadline. And when we talk about multinational organizations, the news is even worse. If you're what they call an enterprise, the fine is up to 4% of your annual revenue. And if you're a multi-billion-dollar company and you 4% of that, obviously that converts to a very, very significant fine.
Wow, that could be a tremendous amount of money.
And not only that, but if you think about, I think there's two things about the being fined. One is, of course, the financial implication. But think about especially the environment we live in today. We talk about the Facebook, and we have a lot of data privacy.
Security breaches.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's a very timely issue. And do you really want your organization to be one of those organizations that's in the news, not being compliant with the privacy policies and individuals' right to their own data security?
Exactly. So, Markku, can you explain to our audience just maybe a little more detail about the GDPR?
Well, I certainly don't want to get too technical today because, like I said, it's a massive regulation and there's a lot of definitions. But I'm going to talk about two things that are important for people who are using assessment tools, because, obviously that's the industry where we are, for them to understand. And then these, by the way, these concept applies to everything else when we're dealing with data, but I'm going to talk about assessments. There are two concepts. There's something called a data controller and data processor. We are, as an extended disk organization, because we process the data, we are the data processor. Our clients, whether they are what we call end users, companies who are using our assessment tools, and by the way, this applies to all assessment tools, Christina. If they're not using extended disk, the same principles apply. So if you're using assessment tools, your organization who uses it with your employees, or your training company, your consulting or coaching firm who's using our assessment with their clients, they become what's known as a data controller. In some situations, they're called joint data controller. But data controller and data processor are clearly separate entities in eyes of GDPR. However, what's really important for our clients to know that the data controller, which they are, it's ultimately responsible for the GDPR compliance. They need to make sure that not only is their organization compliant, but the tools that they use, that they are compliant. So unfortunately, the burden of responsibility and liability really ultimately is on a data controller. And they must, again, ensure that they are in compliance, how they handle personal data, but also all the partners that they use, assessment companies, their financial systems, their CRM systems, that also those are compliant in terms of the GDPR.
So what I'm hearing is that the assessment tool or company itself is identified as the data processor, but you guys out there as users of any type of assessment platforms are the data controller, and ultimately the data controller is responsible for compliance.
They are ultimately responsible, and they must understand that they are responsible. Now, we are responsible. We must be GDPR compliant if they want to make sure that they are in GDPR compliance with when it comes to assessment tools. And of course we are, that's one reason we have in this conversation today. It's timely, but we want to ensure our clients and our prospective clients that we have done everything that we are in terms of assessment system, and as an organization as a whole, we are fulfilling those requirements.
Yes, so we at Extended Disc using the Finks assessment platform is GDPR compliant, but not necessarily all assessment tools are. So Markku, how do we demonstrate compliance?
Well, this concept called a data audit. In order for organizations to be in compliance with GDPR requirements, they must perform what's called a data audit. And again, I don't want to get into too technical about what it requires, because you have to actually go and look at the regulation. And by the way, if you Google this topic, GDPR compliance, you will find a lot of resources. You have to be prepared, spend a lot of time, because some of the information you will get is conflicting, and there's a lot of information, a lot of things you must do. But organizations like Extended Disc, we have like Extended Disc North America, Extended Disc UK, and all of so different offices around the world have done what's called a data audit. And there's two things that you have to think about. One, you have to make sure that the assessment platform, our Finks platform, meets all of the GDPR requirements. And I will talk about that in a moment. But also that what the organization does, that everything they do, all of the operations, also meet those same requirements. So in terms of Extended Disc North America, for example, when we had to do the data audit, we had to make sure that all of our strategic partners, our CRM system, our accounting system, on and on and on, were also in compliance with the GDPR, because we store personal data in those systems. Like an accounting system will have client information. And the only thing you have to have is name, and that's enough to have personal data. So we had to make sure that everything we do is in compliance in terms of our operations. And of course, more importantly, and this is what our clients are most interested in, is that our assessment platform actually meets all of those requirements. And I think this is where there's a lot of confusion in North America. Organizations say that they are in compliance with the GDPR. They update their privacy policies. Those are the kind of things that you've been seeing in your email inbox. But the question is, have they actually performed the data audit to ensure that they are in compliance? And easiest way to make sure they are, ask to see your data audit. If they don't have it, they have not fulfilled this requirement.
So it's one thing to say you are in compliance, but you actually have to show that you are in compliance.
That's correct, Christina. And I can personally understand why there's a lot of confusion, because it's a new regulation that is very, very different than we had in the past. And it takes time for people and organizations to really understand what are the implications of the GDPR regulation. And I think we are still in that, it's not in effect till this Friday. So people are trying to figure out what it actually means. And it's really easy to forget as an organization where all you store your data. We need to think about how do we use our employee data, our shipping data. You be amazed when you actually start doing this audit, how much data about individuals you actually have, and to make sure that that data is protected. It's a huge undertaking. But the only way to make sure that your partner, whether it's assessment partner or any other partner, is in compliance, you need to ask for this data audit.
Wow. It's daunting, but it must be done. So Markku, can you talk specifically for our audience today about Extended Disc Finks assessment platform and how it relates to GDPR?
Sure. And there's many things that the assessment platform must do. And the important thing is not to only focus that the assessment provider says that, hey, yes, we can do these things. But in the eyes of GDPR, you must be able to document everything. And for example, a lot of our clients have heard from us in the last couple of years that we need to transfer you to the new assessment platform. We have the Finks platform that we introduced several years ago that has always been in compliance with GDPR. That was one of the things we had in mind when we developed the system. But our previous platform really could not document everything. It did everything that is required, but it could not document everything. Every login attempt, every kind of thing that happened must be something that you keep logs and document, because if the enforcement comes into place, you must be able to prove that your system is able to provide all this information.
Yeah, so hopefully you guys will come to understand that it's not something that we just did overnight. It's something that we've been working years on. Once they implemented it in 2016, it's something that we have been preparing for.
Absolutely, and it's been a huge undertaking, but it's critical for us. We understand the reason for the regulation. The people should have right to their own personal data. And we certainly, our organization commitment worldwide is that we are in full compliance with GDPR. And I'm going to talk about some of the things. And one of the things is that when people complete the questionnaire, in order for us to collect any kind of information when it comes to GDPR, you must be able to document that what is called a data subject, that's the person who's provided the information, that they clearly gave their consent for the information and for a specific purpose for the information. If they don't provide the consent and you can't document that, then Christina, you are not in compliance. And our questionnaires now, what our clients will see is that before the people begin to fill in the information like their name, etc., much less answering the questionnaire, the individuals must provide their consent, and our system will document that consent. So if they don't check that box, they will not be able to complete the questionnaire.
Yeah, and I understand that, not only can, it's not just, it has to be clear and plain language.
Yeah, it's something that you have to have a lawful way to collect the data. And there's 6 different kind of ways you can lawfully collect data. One of them is that the person provides their clear consent. And that's obviously what we're going to use it with our questionnaires. By the way, one of the things that when it comes to GDPR, they're especially focused on with the regulation to protect the privacy of children. So in our European Union countries, definitely, and when we deal with European Union citizens, if the person is not at least 16 years old and they don't give the consent that they are, we will not collect that data, because otherwise we would be failing the GDPR requirements.
Yeah, didn't I hear somewhere on the radio or on social media that there's a company that pulled out, like, was it Reddit or WhatsApp or something like that? They didn't even allow, they're not even going to allow anyone under a certain age because of this.
Organizations, because they're fine, they're certainly paying attention to it, and a lot of them are using an abundance of caution. Let's take a more risk-averse approach. But the law is very clear. The person must be 16 or older. If they give the consent, then we can collect the data. And again, this assessment system must have this question, and again, must document that we have received that consent. If your system is not capable of doing it, you are not in compliance.
Exactly.
Other thing is that when we transfer data, like typically how people receive the data right now is an email attachment. That data is now encrypted, and we can make sure the assessment results, so other people cannot, if they try to hack to the system or somehow, they're not able to see that data. So the assessment system must be able to transmit the data in an encrypted form. Also, and this is really something that was challenging to create, the system must monitor all activities. Anything that happens in that system, we must be able to document so we can let the authorities know if there was logging attempts, if people deleted data. All of those things need to be documented in order to be in GDPR compliance. Again, our system is.
Yeah, and I also noted that there's one more layer of encryption as well. We can add a password to our report in order for our clients or to open their reports. You can actually add a password to it. So it's just another layer that we've added.
That is correct. And that's something that's actually required in order to be in full compliance, that they are password protected and encrypted data, so to ensure that the person has complete privacy to their information.
Okay.
Other things we need to talk about is, and again, I realize it's kind of boring stuff, I feel like in university, but it's critical that people understand this. When we delete inactive accounts, there's something called a storage limitation. The law is very clear that the data should not be stored if it's not needed. It needs to be deleted. And we have system in place to make sure that that requirement of GDPR is fulfilled. And I already also mentioned about logins. We have to make sure we are able to document all these activities that will take place. Our clients who are using our system, and if you're not using our system, you begin to think about how often do you log in, you send out access codes, different kind of things. We need to make sure that we document all of that. And finally, we must be able to even show who are the individuals who may have had access to the data. So, as you can see, Christina, these regulations are very specific. And again, our assessment system is in compliance with all of these requirements.
Okay, so it sounds a little overwhelming, but I am starting to get a grasp of, how our assessment platform is in compliance and what the GDPR is. But Markku, how does someone out there, in terms of thinking about our own organization, what can they do to be in compliance? What do they need to do?
Well, what they need to do is that individuals must understand that when you look at their assessment system, when it comes to them, I'm not going to talk about other strategic partners, that there are certain principles that GDPR has, and then there's the main ones listed there, like integrity and confidentiality, purpose limitation, etc. I'm not going to go into details because people can Google that and look at the regulation on their own, but they must make sure that their partners, that there are two things: whatever technological systems that they use, in our case is the assessment platform, that assessment platform is able to fulfill all of the GDPR requirements. And now you're going to emphasize that word document one more time, because the system must be able to document all of those activities in order to be in full compliance. You must be able to demonstrate that the person provided the clear consent to provide that information. Because if they do not, you are not allowed to collect that information. Again, it talks about the lawfulness of collecting information. But also the organization itself must be able to fulfill all these principles. So if you think in terms of extended disk, it's twofold. One is we demonstrate with our data audit that our assessment platform fulfills those requirements. But our data audit also demonstrates that all of our activities, all the personal data we collect, that we make sure that we fulfill those GDPR requirements. So it's a twofold thing that you must think about as in terms of assessment user, but in a broader scope, if you use other systems, accounting, CRM, and on, those systems must also be GDPR compliant.
Yeah, it sounds like so in the protection of an individual's data, we really as organizations need to be fully transparent.
We must be fully transparent, and more importantly, we must have performed all of these activities to ensure that we're in compliance. Like I mentioned earlier, I've been reading about this so much in the last year or so. And one of the interesting statistics that I saw, that when it comes to US companies, one of the statistics is that 60% of organizations are very likely to face fines not complying with GDPR.
These are companies in the US.
In the US. Mm-hmm. And I think what has happened is that a lot of us in the United States have kind of seen this as a European Union regulation, mm-hmm. which it is, but it's very far reaching. And organizations sometimes probably don't realize that they actually deal with European citizens to a fairly large extent.
Mm-hmm. And, and not just, I think Markku said it earlier, it's not just about financial costs. It's that negative publicity, which could be even a greater cost.
Absolutely. And then think about the personal cost. If you are an employee of an organization, mm-hmm. and part of your responsibilities is make sure that you are in compliance with different kind of regulations. If you miss this, when it's something that everybody now begins to know about when they see those email reminders every day about GDPR, mm-hmm. and probably notice that a lot of them talk about they go effect on May 25th. That's no coincidence. We're not talking about privacy policy alone. We are talking about GDPR compliance. That's why you see that date so often in those emails. So yeah, it's a critical thing, and I think a lot of people in the United States and outside the European Union are not really prepared for this.
Yeah. Markku, is there anything else? There was a lot of information, but is there anything else that we just need to kind of hit upon today?
Well, one thing that when it comes to the GDPR, and I'm talking about really when it comes to United States especially, mm-hmm. There's something called a EUUS Privacy Shield organization. And I think a lot of organizations kind of mistakenly think that if you are in compliance with this privacy shield, you are in compliance with the GDPR. But that is not the case. What this Privacy Shield really does is talking about transferring data from European Union to United States. And that's only thing it talks about. But even if you look at the Privacy Shield, it's a government organization. It's by U.S. Department of Commerce. You go to their website. This is what they say, that it's important to note that it's not a GDPR compliance mechanism. It's something that's good to have, I'm sure. Our organization has that. But I think what people need to know is that if somebody is in this program, participating in the program, they get the certification, it does not mean that they are GDPR compliant. And I think that's something really critical for your U.S. companies to understand. If they're using assessments, don't be fooled that that if your assessment provider is part of this program, that you are covered when it comes to GDPR.
And what this, and just in summary, what governs the transferring of personal data unidirectional from the European Union to the United States. But in part, it's because, I think you said, we talked about this earlier, it's because the U.S. is not considered adequate.
Yeah, when it comes to data protection, the way European Union looks at United States, they feel that United States does not do enough, and the word they use, it's not adequate when it comes to data protection. But in order to facilitate trade between European Union and United States, this Privacy Shield was created. But it's only talking about data transferring from European Union to United States. And a lot of these multinational companies, when they're using assessment tools, a lot of times they're North American-based companies, and they're transferring data from here to European Union, especially when it's European Union citizens, they are not in GDPR compliance.
Gotcha. So hopefully you guys learned a little bit more about how the GDPR affects you, whether you're in the EU, whether you're outside of the EU. But Markku, can you tell us, how do we find out more about what we talked about today and its impact on our assessment tools as well as our organization?
Well, there's certainly a lot of information out there if you go on Google and you begin to look at the information. And I'm going to warn you, if you're going to go on Google this topic, you might get a little nervous. But if you have specific questions when it comes to assessment, you can certainly contact us. We have some specific pages on our website where you can learn more. If you have specific questions, please email it to us or even type it into the question box on this webinar, and we can certainly help you with that. We are not going to claim to be GDPR experts, but we do claim to be that our organization and our assessment system complies with GDPR. But hopefully we can help at least with some of the questions. I know it's a very boring, dull topic, but again, it's very timely, and it's really important for our clients, our prospective clients, to understand that when it comes to assessments, that they're using a system that is GDPR compliant. And I think we had a little bit of an edge here because, as you know, our roots come from European Union. Our headquarters were originally from in Finland, and they've been driving this kind of a project to make sure that our assessment system and everything is in compliance. It's been a long journey, tough journey, but I'm very happy that we are here and are able to support our clients.
Yeah, I'm proud as well. So thank you for joining us today, Markku. We do have another webinar coming up. It's not on Wednesday as normal. It's actually going to be on Thursday. No, actually, that's right, May 31st. We will be talking about the sales competence assessment. How do the sales competencies, mindsets, and sales excuse index help to create a roadmap to sales success?
Yeah, we get to talk about assessments again and not about regulations. But what I've seen in my email box, I think we have to repeat this topic in maybe a month or so, because what I predict will happen with GDPR is that in the next few months, we here in North America will begin to realize what significant impact it actually has. And I think a lot of organizations will begin to ask, hey, is your assessment system compliant? Can I see your data audit? Do you have everything in place to make sure our organization is covered with the GDPR when it comes to assessments?
Yeah, so we will most likely revisit this topic, maybe have it even some updates. So just keep in touch with us. You can check out our events section at our public website, www.extendeddisc.org.
Yeah, and I think we recorded this thing, so they will be available
Yes.
in our website here next week or so. So if you want to share it with people in your organization that think need to know this, please by all means do so. I hope you found it helpful. And Christina, let me say thank you first this time. Usually say thank you, but thanks, Christina, and thank you everybody in the audience, and good luck with the compliance.
All right. Have a great day, people.